Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Osuya Special Open Meeting, February the 21st, 2020 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. So is there any introduction of late items? No, thank you. Could we please have a motion to approve the agenda as printed? Thank you. Councillor Bennett, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. There are no bylaws. The first item is business number 1, water treatment and manganese removal. And that would be a report from our Director of Operations, Mr. Brownstein. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, you'll find a report before you for moving our water system towards groundwater treatment instead of surface water treatment. Back in February 2019, there was a report brought to Council with 3 options to move forward with potential treatment for our domestic water system. Option 1 was 2 treatment facilities, one on the East Bench, both on the West Bench, one out towards Spartan and one down in Jackshaw Park. Option 2 was 3 groundwater treatment plants, one in Jackshaw, one in Spartan, and one on the East Bench. And option 3 was a surface water intake. At the time, there were restrictions with capacity going under Osoyoos Lake when this report was brought to Council. So at that time, we decided to move towards surface water as our potential domestic source. In light of some recent information coming our way from the OIB and from the province, the OIB has supported our 10-year application to go under Osoyoos Lake. This now frees up option 1 as a more economical option for our groundwater system to treat it. So then translates into 2 treatment plants, one at Jackshaw Park and then one at the end of Spartan Drive, and allows us to bring raw water over from the East Bench to the West Bench to treat and then into the distribution system. So we basically brought a report here advising that that's the method in which we'd like to move towards. With that, there's a grant application coming February 26th, which is next week, for Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure, the Environmental Quality Program. We will be looking for $11.9 million to start to move forward with groundwater treatment to remove manganese, to provide UV disinfection on our system as well as chlorine contact dam. With that comes the controversial discussion about universal water metering. As part of this grant application, we are suggesting that we move forward with universal metering as part of this program and project. Unfortunately, and we've had discussions with the province to date, we missed the boat when it came to provincial and federal funding to install water meters. They've given us the advice that they will no longer fund via grant programs for metering. So in order to put metering in place, it comes out of our own pocket, whether it be reserves, borrowing, capital reinvestment, etc. But in order to make our treatment facility, I guess, more viable and less costly, we need to bring that water demand down. And the only way of doing that is bringing in universal metering. So the treatment facility as is designed should universal metering be in place. If we end up not going down the path of universal metering, then the design increases, costs go up. Longevity of our system is reduced, so then the next plant comes into place sooner, then we start looking for more water sources. Everything just kind of moves up very quickly without being able to put universal water metering in play.
Go ahead, Jim. Then I had a couple questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question. I know some feedback in Oliver when they put the meters in, water consumption did go down about 35%, which was very exciting for them. But now over the past 2 years, it's gone back up, so it's only down about 5% from 3 years ago. So what would impact that on your new water system?
I'll let Steve answer that question.
There's several ways of looking at water demand, but the one in Oliver that has gone down significantly and stayed down is maximum day demand. And that is our main issue here, in that with our well sources, they have to be able to provide the demand on our maximum day. That's our biggest concern. Our reservoirs can only buffer out a day's worth of peaks. It doesn't buffer out a week's worth of peaks. So the maximum day demand in Oliver is down closer to in half. I have the exact numbers available, and it, as a result, has had them not need to turn on some of their wells. And we're needing the same effect here. What we're planning on doing with this proposed phase 1 treatment plant is not run on well 6, because well 6 has manganese, and so we would leave well 6 basically off or as a spare until we get a treatment plant there. But with metering, we won't need a treatment plant there until closer to 2025.
And how many wells do they have compared to how many wells we have?
In Oliver, they have 4 or 5 wells, but their largest 2 were called Legion Beach, or Lions and CPR, sorry. And they became contaminated with uranium a few years ago, and Oliver's had to turn them off. And because of metering, they haven't actually had to replace that source capacity. So they were actually, with metering, able to lose their 2 larger sources and still have adequate water.
Thanks.
So, my concern is that this is obviously a long process, so it's going to take some time to get all this up and running, and obviously put in meters. So I'm thinking anybody listening to this today is going to say, yikes, they're coming to dig up my property next week and put meters in. But do you have any idea of if we were to go ahead with this, the way you've suggested, how long this whole process would take?
Yeah, so we would hope that if we make this grant application and funding is received or announced by the end of summer, that sometime in 2021, we would be beginning a water metering program and have meters fully installed by 2022. And then maybe starting some sort of mock billing or whatever process, and maybe billing on them by 2023 or 2024, whereas the treatment plant would be coming online by 2023.
Okay, so in other words, you're suggesting that the water meters would go in before the actual treatment plant?
Well, we would commence construction on all the water mains required to bring raw water to Jack Shaw Gardens right away. But by the time we actually built the treatment facility, commissioned it, and actually got it running, it would probably be closer to 2023. And at that time, we would want to be able to turn well 6 off and run on treated water only. Up until that time, we would have some extra capacity available because we'd be able to run that at well 6.
Okay, so does this, I mean, I'm just looking at the water twinning that we've done up and down. I mean, that has taken years and years and years and lots of money. So if you're going to suggest that water metering could be initiated and put in to everybody in town, is that what you're saying? That isn't done quickly, is it? I mean, that takes, or it can be.
It would be done, it would probably take about 12 months, but by the time we started to by the time we finished. So whenever we do start, that gets meters in. That doesn't mean we're actually charging people based on their metered rate. We would have time to work on that as well. But we found even installing them curbs demand, because people start thinking about it. They know that billing is coming. It doesn't, you get more demand reduction out of your rate design, but you will get an immediate reduction once the meters go in.
So what happens if we don't get the grant?
Well, it just pushes the timeline out.
Okay,
However, we still want to move toward metering sooner rather than later.
good, go ahead.
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam Mayor.
King?
So this grant would be for the full 11 million for the infrastructure?
The way we're proposing it right now in the documents that are the reports in front of you,
Yeah.
and that's part of the discussion we wanted to have, was we're proposing, it's an $11.9 million project, and we're proposing to ask for 0 government contribution towards the metering portion. But we're showing metering in the project. It shows it as a bigger project, and it shows that we're willing to fund a larger percentage than the kind of the minimum. But then we are, for the other two components, which are the treatment plant and the raw water mains or the distribution upgrades, we're proposing that the town ask for full grant funding for those two components. So of the 11.9, the proposed town funding is 5.2.
Myers, did you have a question?
Yes, the meters, are they something that they're gonna be there 20 years? Are they gonna be like the electric ones where all of a sudden 2 years down the road, they say, oh, here's a new design, and do we get caught in that kind of thing?
Yeah, the meter body itself will have a life of, say, 20 years, with the batteries will need to be replaced after. They have a prorated warranty for 10 years. I think people are finding they're maybe only lasting closer to 7. But so we will have to go back out and change batteries.
And who pays for those?
That's a public works operations expense.
Because it's a town meter.
Yeah.
And it goes in, the batteries were replaced in every meter at every house, is that what you
Yes.
mean? Okay. Okay. Counselor Appleby.
I guess this is towards Ellen, more than anything. We found out just at a recent meeting that some of the reserve funds for the water systems were jointly owned by the rural people and the town. How will we be impacted, us rural people, when you guys are gonna supposedly pay a few $1 million to be metered? And we've already, with our expansions, I've put in meters, and I assume that cost has come to us.
Your worship, it's interesting that we say now that the government will no longer grant fund meters, but in fact, that's what they did with the rural water twinning projects, with both of them.
Well, and that was my
And
next
so
question.
the rural folks are beneficiaries of that opportunity having come along, but it seems as if that ship has sailed. I don't know, we haven't calculated all of the options, debt costs, borrowing, whether or not we get grants. I think the next important phase is going to be rate design and water utility fees and who pays what. Do I have an answer for that and what the costs look like going forward as a result of all this? No, there's too many unknowns at this time. We don't know what metering's going to cost, really. You've funded in the capital plan for this year a metering implementation study, which will help inform those decisions about who should pay what. I think there's an argument to be made that the rural water users, through their water utility rates, would benefit from conservation measures in town. If we can knock off those peak day demands, then the level of infrastructure that we all jointly fund to put potable water into pipes is reduced, and therefore everybody saves money. It's not simple, and it'll be the subject of a whole lot more detailed reports if and when we get grant funding, and if we don't. One of the things we'll do, hopefully next year, whether we get grants or not, is the water mains under the channel on the lake. While we've got the approval in place, let's move on that project, because that's key to our ability to use groundwater for municipal source, as opposed to lake with a tens of millions of dollars treatment facility required. So I can't really give you a great answer.
Yeah, and my next question, I guess, is more towards you, is if the town put in a request to have the metering funded along with this, sort of a two-option request, saying option one is 11 million, and we'd like 35% of the metering to be paid for, or 40%, doesn't matter, pick a number. And therefore, we're not just asking for 7, we're gonna ask for 9 or something like that. And if you don't like that, then option 2 is, as you people have proposed this morning. Does that muddy the water so that they don't wanna pick, or?
We were successful in the first round of this grant program with getting funding for twinning. The odds of us being successful in round 2 are actually been lowered. And so this is part of our strategy, or our recommendation to you for a strategy, is to put in the strongest application possible. And by you showing that you're funding closer to 50% of this project than you are the 27% kind of minimum, it's making your case stronger. That's kind of our recommendation. Anything that we start saying we want to ask for funding for metering, we think will give them an excuse to say no to this application.
We're the only community that doesn't have universal metering. Yeah. So what are you asking for today, Mr. Brownstein?
So staff is recommending the council approve an application for grant funding of 6.6 million of the 11.9 needed to complete phase 1 of the groundwater treatment project, generally described in the water treatment and manganese removal feasibility study by Tree Consulting. That the 5-year financial plan be updated to reflect that change, which we're currently working on with Mr. Zackel. And that council authorized staff to, and this is another portion of this report, is that with staff be authorized to reassign the 2020 capital line for pilot study effectiveness of treatment process for surface water, seeing the fact we're no longer moving towards a surface water source, of 400,000 to the design and architectural review of the groundwater treatment facility. Basically, the resolution we're asking for is that True Consulting, on behalf of the town of Osoyoos, submit an application for grant funding for water treatment and manganese removal through the ICIP, Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Substream, and then council supports the project and commits to its share of 5.3 million for phase 1 of the project costs.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You indicated you're talking to Director Zackel in terms of changing the capital plan. I guess there's no visibility in today's reports as to what that looks like. How are we going to fund that 5.3 million? Over how many years is it going to be financed? What's the annual to the ratepayer kind of information? I'm not seeing any of that. I recognize this as non-discretionary almost, but it's still, I'd be comforted to have a sense as to what the next year's tax bill is going to look like to fund this project, and for the next 20 years or however long it's going to take for funding. Maybe our Chief Administrative Officer might have.
Your Worship, the first recommendation is that the 5-year financial plan be updated, and how that is incorporated into the plan at the end of the day will be subject to the full council's discretion on decisions, and what amount of operating surplus can be allocated towards the water system, what type of water reserves we have, how long debt is contracted for these works, will all influence what future rates will be. So while you're indicating support for projects described in the feasibility study and for grant applications and for the application of municipal funds towards the project, the details are yet to be determined. And it certainly doesn't tie council's hands. You aren't forced to make these decisions. There will be options in the future and decisions having to be made. So yeah, this is preliminary. This is driven forward at this time because of the grant funding deadline being February 26th. This all came together rather quickly when we got an approval from the OIB for the Crown Land tenure to allow water lines under the lake. And that was just last month that we got the confirmation from them. And so the idea was, let's take advantage of this window of opportunity. But I do realize there's a lot of unknowns here.
So even if we approved applying for this grant, we still have lots of other questions that we could get answers to before we.
There's lots of
yeah.
work to be done.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor
Yeah,
Kane.
thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess the real question is, though, I mean, I support trying to get $6 million, by putting in the grant, we put ourselves in a loop that we gotta find $5 million to top it up somehow. And that's the question, we don't know how, but we're supposed to have to come up with $5 million somehow, whether it's taxes, borrowing, or whatever, is what you're really telling me.
That is correct.
At the end of the day, if you are awarded the grant, you don't have to accept it, though. But it'd probably be in our
Well, I
best
mean,
interest.
it's pretty hard to turn down $6 million.
Well, and, you know, a lot of the answers to council's questions about financial impacts will become about through water metering implementation strategy and plan that's been funded for this year. So that will inform the future.
I
and how it
understand the
goes.
study will give us sort of options of where to find the money or how to fund it, but we are putting ourselves in the line for 5 million. It's real simple, I mean.
I mean, council could not support this report and not go towards grant funding for 2020 submission. We could hold off till 2021 or 2022. Again, we got this information at the beginning of this month, sorry, Mr. Chabot, the stuff from OIB came at the beginning of the month. And of course, it completely changed how we were looking at this program. It changed it like
Yeah.
that. The 5-year capital reflected a $40 million
Yeah.
treatment facility,
Yeah.
surface water. So that has already been identified in the 5-year capital. We're not pulling that back to an $11.9 million treatment facility. So
Real bargain.
the finances
I got-
should have been addressed at that point, and yeah.
I got one more question, if
Yeah.
you don't mind. Since the minimum could have been 28% and you come up with about 54%, how did you come up with 50? Why didn't we put in, just us putting in 40% instead of 50?
For the estimated
And that
part
saves
of
a
the
million.
meters, I just put $0 towards the meters and
Yeah.
then did the maximum funding for the other two components of the project. So that was, it just worked out to be 54%. But we want to be clear in our messaging to the government that meters are required to make this project successful. We can't do it without water conservation. And so therefore meters are in the project. But we're not asking for funding for them.
No, I respect what you're saying. It's just kind of an interesting formula. I mean, if we put in for 40%, or we're only gonna put in 40%, we save $1 million.
And that could be a decision you make, is that we ask
Yeah.
for partial funding of the meters, but only a small percent. But this was cleaner
Yeah,
in our text
cleaner.
to say no funding for the meters.
Okay.
Quite often when we do ask for a grant on things, we don't get the full amount. So we may have to look at, what if they say we'll give you 75% or something, because they don't have to give us the full 11 million, do they? Or will they, do you think, if they're gonna approve it? We've often had ones where it's been a partial grant and then we have to sort of look at it again.
For projects such as these water projects, I haven't had much experience where they offer us less. Sometimes
okay,
we
good.
break a project into phases and they offer us only funding for phase one. But otherwise, they'll usually offer, fund it at the amount the percentage we ask it to be funded at.
So the other thing is, do we require a letter from Interior Health or the Ministry of Health? I would assume that this would be something they would be very much supportive of. And I'm just wondering, do they put in a letter of support or not? Is that?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, they are actually providing us with a letter of support. That is in the works as we speak.
Okay, okay. Because they've pushed it, haven't they, about all this? Yeah. go
Yes,
ahead.
Madam Mayor. If we don't do this now, we're gonna be having to put the meters in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years anyway. And at that time, and we're still gonna have to put the water in, it's just gonna be a bigger cost, so by us delaying, it's gonna cost us twice as much.
Possibly.
Yeah. So by not putting in meters, we are working towards bringing well 7 online, and that will be an ask for funding will be to bring well 7 online, because we don't have capacity to meet demand should one of our wells break down during the summer period. And so well 7 will be the next ask if we're not successful and if we don't put in meters. After that, we don't know where the next well is, so we'll have to start searching for it. And we'll be in this program of trying to find more wells at full cost dollars, because no one's gonna fund more wells if we don't have demand management implemented. And we'll be looking for new sources.
I'll put a motion on the floor that you move forward with the grant application. We've kind of stalled this a few years as it is on water meters. We're the last community in the South Okanagan without meters, so I think when you can try to get $6 million to bring to our communities a plus.
Is that you making
Yeah.
the motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second
You seconding that motion? Any other comments on this? No? Good. All right, well, let's ask for a vote on this. All in favor? Thank you very much. Now what?
Next item on the agenda.
Mr. Brownstein?
Are you the next item?
Very deep. So your worship, just going through all, that's one that's on here.
In the garbage.
There we go.
So are we done with
Garbage.
this water issue for the moment? You're just gonna,
Yeah, we did the recommendations all as one big.
okay, because there's a ton of different things here moved, so I'm just wondering, I wanted to make sure we had it all
We caught
covered.
them all in one.
Okay.
Do we didn't have to separate? No. Okay.
Can I ask one question first about the manganese?
Yes.
We did kind of a pilot project, didn't we, some time back? Can you comment on that and what happened and what we need to do going forward?
So in 2011,
Yeah,
council, in reaction to dirty water complaints, so just the aesthetic problems of manganese, asked staff and through to us to look at the feasibility of removing manganese from your water supply. And we went to tour manganese removal plants around here and couldn't find any. We ended up in Nova Scotia looking at water treatment plants to see how they were doing it out there. And we found two technologies, one being a biological removal process and one being chemical. And found that while biological didn't work everywhere, its waste stream was much easier to deal with, and in some cases could be dumped straight to the environment. So we wanted to see if that was viable for you, and therefore we piloted that technology at 2 of your wells in 2012 to then come up with cost estimates for the town for the removal of manganese from an aesthetic perspective. Those costs weren't really palatable because it wasn't a requirement at the time, and the project kind of the idea of the project was included in the water capital plan, but it wasn't really decided we were gonna proceed with it, but we've always been building towards that option one. Option one was always what we were building towards doing, should the town pull the trigger. Then when manganese became a requirement last year, like a maximum concentration, and your water is now out of line, like that's what's triggered us to move this to the forefront.
okay. And you said that there were no things to bring in to remove manganese here, and you had to go to Nova Scotia. Does that mean that we're the only community that has this problem, or are there other communities too, and what causes it?
Yeah, so, yeah, my firm itself has designed 4 of these plants
In
since
BC.
2012, since we did this touring and learned about this biological technology. And more communities are going to be bringing it in. It's not a common problem, but there are, like the next largest one will be City of Williams Lake. But there's like Village of Burns Lake, District of 100 Mile House,
Yes.
108, they all have these removal treatment plants already.
And it's just a
Naturally
mineral that's
occurring
there
mineral,
and
yeah.
it's not, oh, okay, all right. Okay. Thank you. So,
Recordo.
yes, go ahead.
Is this pilot thing still working here?
No.
No. We ran it for several months, and then moved it, we ran it at well 8 and then moved it to well 6. And then we proceeded to move it all around the province. We did pilot studies for
And does
several.
it work?
It works wonderfully for your water, and it works wonderfully in these other communities that we put it in. But there are water chemistries where it won't work, but that's not yours. It depends on pH, temperature, and some other minerals that are in the water, but the pilot study showed it does work here.
So you run the water through this biochemical whatever, and then what happens to the water after that? Something falls out the side or what?
Yeah, so it's a sand media in a pressure vessel that we aerate underneath to provide oxygen to the media, and on that media, a bacteria grows that consumes manganese. And so we push all the water over that media, and part of the pilot was to determine how much media we needed, because the pilot study did tell us that. And so the bacteria consume the manganese, and then they're sitting on the media, and after a while we have to backwash them out. And we take that to a settling tank, and what happens is a sludge settles out, and we can actually decant the clear water off the top and feed it back into the front of the plant and refilter it. And what we're finding is our backwash rate is only 0.1%, whereas when we started this, we were told it was closer to 10%, but we're able to get it quite down by decanting and refeeding. So the waste stream is quite low from this process. The biological process, there's no chemicals.
Right, and so the manganese that you collected goes where?
Into basically a tank, like a settling tank. Some public works will come by periodically with their suck truck and suck the sludge out of there,
And take it up to the dump?
take it to the landfill where we have the hauled liquid waste ponds.
So-
Thank you.
So this water treatment plant, once it goes in, will address the manganese at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chabot, we've got no, we're good with that one?
Niche happy man?
So
Good, I learned something new about manganese removal.
So you'll get on that right away, getting this grant in?
We are already been writing it. as
Thank you.
can tell.
Oh, you were anticipating.
Yeah.
Can I, Madam McCarroll?
Sure.
What's it cost to build a little plant or whatever you need to do well 6 or 7 or what, just 1 or 2 of the wells?
The well 6-7 plant is $4.5 million. That includes pumps in well 1 or 7.
So this gizmo you're moving around the province is only a minuscule thing.
Yeah, it was treating, say, 10 or 20 gallons a minute. The full functioning one will treat thousands of gallons a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. We have another item on the agenda. And is that you as well? Mr. Brownstein?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is staff report in regard to reusable containers for our recycling program. The town is required to provide reusable recycling containers to the community by July 1st of this year, as per our statement of work with Recycle BC. These containers can either be provided by the town or a waste management contractor. Town has proposed or considered 2 options. One is a 121 liter round blue container with a lid, and the other option is a 240 liter wheeled cart with a lid. Again, there's been further discussion going all the way back to 2018 in regards to Recycle BC and their now removal of blue bags, which has brought this to its head. So again, commencing July 1st, homeowners will no longer be able to place the recycling at the curb in blue bags. We are required as the Recycle BC contractor to provide a reusable container for every residential consumer in the community by July 1st. So there's 3 options. So there's a town supply container, which is a 121 liter container, which should be looking at approximately a $31 a year hit to each user. There's an option 1A, which is instead of the container, we actually provide a cart, which would be similar to the ones that Waste Connection already provides to some members of the community at $42 per year per user. And option 2 would be our collection contractor actually providing us a rent-to-own program at $42 a year for a 240 liter cart.
So can I ask, at the regional district, the rural areas are not going with carts. So if the contractor had said, for health reasons, safety reasons, we require you to have a cart that we can load and empty. They didn't. So when we looked at this, and I know it was quite a discussion here at council, we looked at the options for people to either get a cart, and some people in town already do that, and they rent it, and I'm not quite sure how that works, but you could also use one of the blue containers that we have around the office here. You could also use a cardboard box and put recycle on it. So are those options not on the table? Can we not can somebody, rather than getting a card or renting one, use one of those other?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, no. Recycle BC has come back and said that they will not support us in going down that route. The reason I get from them is our diversion rates aren't there. So the RDOS has a high diversion rate. They're actually seeing buy-in from rural customers at an exceptional level. So they were in agreement with the RDOS at that time that yes, because your recycle use is high, we will work with you to allow for the placement of a personal recycle bin. What they've come back and told this community is our recycling use isn't high enough, and you shall provide a bin to each property owner so that they start to
Okay.
continue with recycle.
I don't see the connection between type of bin and.
Yeah.
So what
their
they're saying
consent.
is they want to force people to have recycling bins. So the only way of their vision of only way of providing them to force is that we supply. So the only way that we can make sure that every property owner within this community has a bin is if we supply that bin. How we just supply that bin is strictly up to us. We can supply that green or that blue tote or whatever we want to supply. But we have to supply it as a community. Recycle BC will not allow us because, again, our statement of work says that we shall, and we need their authorization in order to deviate from that statement of work.
So could we use, like, I have an extra garbage can, could I use that?
The town can supply anything.
Oh.
The
But
problem
if
is
I've already
we
got something,
that's
you don't
fine.
have to supply it to me, am I correct? Or you have to?
I have to, or we have to as a community. Recycle BC has stated that we shall, as a community, provide some sort of container for recycling.
Go ahead.
So, an option for the town would be to supply a blue tote.
Yes. So
And
that would
it's
be,
not-
that would be closer to that $31 per user per year cost.
But I can buy one for $10 down the street. Can't I? I mean, I could. You
Yeah.
know, why would I have to pay $31 a year to get, it was different, this is different from what we were discussing when we brought this up a year or so ago. That's why I'm asking.
Okay,
I'm not
and
trying to-
again, unfortunately, I wasn't here for
Yeah,
those discussions. I've pounded this out with Recycle BC. I've asked all the questions you're asking me, and it basically comes back as you shall supply, end of discussion. If you guys, if we decide to go with, a different type of container, and all you want to supply is the little blue ones, then there are going to be other delays to that now I have to explain to Recycle BC that, okay, now I've got to go source all these containers, I've got to go through the proper sourcing procedures, everything else. Whereas the recommendations provided in this report is that we're pushing that requirement, that responsibility, that renewal, that everything onto the contractor instead of us bringing it in-house. If we supply the bins, we have to now maintain them. We now have to replace them. We now have to supply them. We have to make sure that when they get stolen, we've got enough ample opportunity to have them in our shop to provide more. So again, that's where that $31 a year starts to come in. It's not just the actual cost of the bin. The town now has to maintain, operate, and sustain those bins.
Could different people in town opt for different, or do we all have to have the same?
You will all have to have the same.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this a small one or the large one?
This would be the large one, Councilor King.
And am I allowed to have two?
Do you want to pay for two?
No, I just say you don't have the answer.
I don't have the answer for that.
I'm,
Because I have a lot of recyclable in this country, that's all we produce.
Yeah. Probably what it would be a site property-specific change. It would probably end up being an additional cost to that particular property owner for that another bin. So we'd look at additional rental cost of another $41 or $42 per year for that extra bin.
And then down the road, are we looking for the other type of bin for just normal garbage?
There is discussions currently in play with Waste Connections. There are some other things that have to come in out with that. There are some costs in regards to change of trucks. There's some costs in regards to their ability to collect.
Yeah, it's
There's
gonna be
costs in regards
interesting in a small town with small properties, how they're gonna collect this with the monster arms.
I agree. Councillor Bennett.
If I can just make a statement, today's meetings show the taxpayers that basically a lot of times we don't have a choice. We're getting told by Interior Health, there's manganese, you have to change it,
Yeah.
you gotta spend this amount of money. Now, with these cans, the same thing, they're saying you have to do this and spend this money. So a lot of the money that taxpayers see that are being spent are not in our control.
I agree.
One last question.
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Vern.
Recycling is in my view, very different than potable water. Recycling is an option that we as a community enter into, or we don't. Otherwise, it goes to landfill, right? The glass jars and whatnot. But it's an option. And here up to date, people go to the Home Hardware and buy a box of blue bags for $10 that lasts them a year. And now we're saying they have to spend $42 a year, and they have to, and a lot of people don't do that. They opt out. They don't recycle. They don't spend anything. And now we're going to telling them that they have to. We're going to tax them on their bill at each year, $42. I don't see it.
I agree. I think that I agree with the bags. I'm all for getting rid of the bags. That doesn't bother me, especially the single-use plastic bags, not these ones so much. But I do think that we should be not forcing people who are not going to use a big bin to put the recycling in. And quite frankly, we need to cut down on recycling. We should be reusing and reducing, not bringing out mounds of recycling, which then causes further problems. We need to absolutely
That's
cut
not
down
your
on
problem.
that. You want to hear the rest of it? Jared's heard it before.
I appreciate council's comments.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comments, your worship. In all honesty,
Yeah, I know.
as a community, our hands are tied. We went into a contract with Recycle BC for the next, I think 10 years, something along those lines. We've committed to our statement of work. We've committed to providing them the services. We've committed to this community that we shall provide recycling. If you want to opt out, that's something if this community feels it's necessary, they want to opt out of recycling, that's a challenge all on its own. Recycle BC may fight you pretty damn hard. But then if we look at doing our own recycling programs, then us as a community is looking for buyers. So then we're having to go out and source from GFL. We're having to go out and source who's taking our paper, who's taking our cardboard, who's taking our glass, who's taking all these types of different recycling materials that are available to the community. This is the start of a trend within the recycling, within the organics and everything else. So
I get it, but we need to come up with better ways. Go ahead.
We move forward with this recycle bin. As an individual, though, I could opt out of the bin.
not the way the statement of work is stated, no.
So you have to have a bin in front of your house, and you have to pay this money every year.
Yep.
Well,
It would
that's
be
gonna
good.
be a hard sell, isn't it?
It's 30
And does Recycle have any type of grant program?
No.
Wow. That does not apply, that's differently, it applies differently to a place like, I'm thinking White Sands.
Yeah, they got the big.
They
No.
would have, they do their
They will
own
do their own
recycling
thing.
and.
So this is
okay.
only to do with residential customers.
Yeah,
Commercial and multifamily are not included in this program.
okay. So now you're looking to have us choose one of these?
The recommendation at current is that we move towards a rent-to-own program with our waste and melt collections contractor at $42 per year.
Sorry, which option is that then?
That is option 2.
Option 2.
I do also want to make clear, this is only a 6-year program. After the 6 years, these carts belong to the town. And after that, there is a reduction in cost. However, I want council to be aware that instead of reducing rates, we move those extra added costs to a reserve program, so that this isn't, that when we need to replace the carts 10 years down the road, this discussion does not come up again. Then all of a sudden we need to jump up fees again to $50 a user per year in order to cover the costs of renewal.
What do you think, council?
I
guess-
move option one. The staff recommendation.
Yeah, because I was,
Or 2.
the staff recommendation is option 2. So there is an option 1, an option 1A, and then underneath that, it's the option 2 contractor supplied? Is that what you're talking about?
That is
Yeah.
correct, Your Worship.
Okay, it doesn't say that over here. So you could do it either per year, you could do it for 6 months, is that what?
So-
It's a little confusing.
With July 1st being the
Deadline.
the deadline for us
Oh, I
converting
see.
over, it's only the first 6 months of the year that we'd have to pay for a rent-to-own program. With that, we do have $50,000 in reserves that can cover that first 6 months of costs. So the taxpayer would actually only see the additional $42 a year starting in 2021.
The $42 a year. I don't know, what do you think? I don't like
Made a
any of
motion.
them, quite frankly, but
Yeah, I don't like any of them either. I think we need to go back and pound on Recycle BC just to see,
Ain't gonna happen.
to look for more affordable options.
Not gonna happen.
yeah.
I can't support either of these.
I'm just wondering, have all other communities that are going through this, have they all had the same options as we've been given?
All been very similar. They may vary. Again, these are the two options that we chose as staff to present. For instance, the city of Penticton has gone 100% cart program. Town of Oliver is 100% cart program. That's
Yes.
how they got to this point.
So
We,
what do they pay? Do they pay on a monthly basis? I'm thinking of Oliver. and
I
know
don't know, Your Worship.
Okay, okay.
I can ask the question. It
Sure.
was probably rolled into the costs of the initial collection contract.
Mm-hmm.
So it may have been deferred over the 5 years and rolled into that cost. So I wouldn't have an actual per user per month cost. It would have been rolled into their original contract.
This is kind of
Wow.
top down, and we've
Yeah.
stalled it right to the end. Now, there is a deadline, July 1st. We've stalled it 2 years of discussions. It's not fair that government's downloading to us and
Nope.
putting the burden on the taxpayer, but it
No,
is
it
what
isn't.
it is. So it's really whether we have staff maintain them and buy a bunch and have a few extras in the yard, add a lot of staff time, or have a third party do it for the extra $11 a year.
What do you think? Anybody want to make a motion on this or not?
Well,
Counselor King?
I did make.
I'm sorry.
What
You
was
made
your
the
motion?
I
Option
made the
2?
motion there, option.
Sorry,
Their
sorry,
recommend-
Counselor
their
Bennett.
Option 2?
Yes.
Yeah,
You'll second that?
yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, if you go down and get a blue box and it costs you $10, and how many are you gonna buy in the 5 years?
One.
Maybe.
We
All
have,
sitting on the street. The other guy goes, oh, I need a blue box. So I don't think you're gonna buy one blue box in 5 years.
Well, you
or
can
6
use a
years.
cardboard box. They allow that.
no, they don't.
No, they don't.
Not after
That's the
July
problem, Your
1st.
Worship. They won't allow us to do
You
that.
gotta have a bin.
They don't.
They will not
You're
allow
right,
us to
in
do it
town they
in
won't.
town
In
they won't.
in Area
Yes.
A, they will.
So you need to
Yeah.
remove yourself from our
Yeah.
DOS and bring it to
Yeah,
the town of
I agree.
Osoyoos.
So that's the problem, is that there's too many options
Yes.
and too many different communities doing different things, which
Yep.
is why it's so confusing.
Yep.
Yeah,
Gotta put the other hat on. You're in the town today.
I know, absolutely. Okay, so, the motion is that we go with option 2, which is going to cost $42 a year.
No, option 2 says town council does not sign the SOW for curbside.
Sorry, I was looking at the option 2 contractor supplied.
No,
the
option 2 on the
recommendation.
report.
We got 2 different reports.
Where's,
Option 2 is to abandon the existing recycling program.
sorry.
I'm looking at staff
I'm looking
recommendation.
at the options at the end here. Which one are you on? This one? This is the staff report.
His says
Where's
2.
the recommendation?
Nixon.
And these are the options, 1, 1A, or 2.
It's under the staff recommendation.
And, yeah,
That's
this
what I
is
meant.
2.
I don't know.
Is option
It's
2 is
different on
what
his-
he
what he's
said.
reading.
Oh, sorry, I'm reading something different.
Okay, so option 2 is for $42 per year, but it would not start until 2021.
That is
Am I
correct, Your Worship.
Okay,
So there's no cost to the taxpayer for the first 6 months.
That is correct.
Well, you've got a reserve fund. that
You got a reserve
taxpayers
fund that
contribute
taxpayers have
to.
already,
So we'll offset that as,
yes,
town will offset the first 6 months?
that's correct.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Against? Thank you. So is that everything that we have to deal with today? Anything
No more
else?
money, you can't do anything.
No, I know, we're out of money. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, we want to sit here for a while and keep these guys suffering? I'll make a motion to
Counselor
adjourn.
King, Counselor Bennett, all in favor. Thank you.